Aren't you going to congratulate me? It's my 20th birthday. Hello, my name is Will, and you're listening to Exploding Helicopter, a scaly, fire-breathing monstrosity of a podcast. Now, one of the endlessly fascinating aspects of film is the way in which different cinematic cultures absorb the influences from around the world and then reinterpret them. This form of international hybridization has thrown up some good films, some bad films, and a handful of bonkers fiascos that defy all reason. Guess which type we're looking at today. So on this show, we're casting our eye over one such example of cross-cultural collision, 2007's Dragon Wars, a film which attempts to combine ancient Korean folklore with modern Hollywood blockbuster special effects. And talking of things from different continents awkwardly bolted together, my guest once again is Nick Rehak from French Toast Sunday. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing great, Will. How are you?
I am doing very well. I'm doing very
Good.
well, and I'm glad that I could have you back to do the Dragon Wars film, because this is a really special film to look at in the exploding helicopter canon, because when I first watched it a little while ago, very recently, I discovered that this is the movie with the most exploding helicopters. And the reason I'm glad that to have you back for this is because obviously we reviewed Battleship together, which was the previous record holder with 8 exploding helicopters. So I felt I owed it to you to get you back to kind of share with you Dragon Wars and the kind of the new title holder of the greatest exploding helicopter movie of all time.
I appreciate it. I feel like you've included me on all of the historic ones where we see the first record of an exploding helicopter, and then you think of, Firebird, Wings of the Apache, when you have all these virtual reality explosions, and if you were to include that, how many in that discussion. So I'm just excited. This movie, I was just excited. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, your excitement when I told you that you were going to be reviewing the film with the most exploding helicopters probably dissipated. I don't think there's any spoiler to say. Probably dissipated fairly rapidly once you started watching the film.
Oh, 5 minutes in, I said, I've made a terrible mistake. Let me just buckle up and we'll get through this together. And by together, I mean me and my cat. And at one point, even he got up and left. And I'm like, well, it's just me here.
Well, we better not spoil our main review discussion. So why don't we get into that? So before we get into that, let's hear a little of the underwhelming trailer for Dragon Wars.
It began as a legend. This fall, something unimaginable, something unexplainable.
Which thing do we know about it?
We can only conclude that it's foreign in nature.
We're gonna get fired for this. We're talking about deploying armed forces in a major city. I need to know exactly what the hell we're up against.
Something extraordinary.
You said it was big. You didn't say it was something that could swallow a bus.
Will turn our world into a battlefield.
Dragon Wars came out in 2007. The story follows the adventures of Ethan Kendrick, and you'll have to bear with me as there's quite a lot of plot to get through here. So we first meet him as a child, where he learns that he's the reincarnation of an ancient bodyguard. Throughout time, his ongoing mission is to protect the Yu-Yi-Jo, a special person with the power to create a celestial dragon. Skip forward 15 years and the evil dragon lord Buraki wants to harness the powers of the Yu-Yi-Jo for his own wicked ends. Buraki learns that this special woman called Sarah is now living in Los Angeles. So Buraki then invades Los Angeles with his army of monsters to capture Sarah. There's a big battle between the US military and the monsters, during which Ethan enters the action to help protect Sarah. The action then moves into a interdimensional plane where there's a final showdown between Buraki, Sarah and Ethan before we mercifully reach the end of this mumbo jumbo. In the lead roles you have Jason Behr, Amanda Brooks and Robert Forster. And if you're a fan of tough guy character actors, there are small roles for Chris Mulkey and a always shirtless Matthias Hughes. The film is not very well regarded, as you may have guessed already. It has a 3.5 rating on IMDb and an audience rating of just 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. However, this film was something of a big deal when it was released. At the time, it held the distinction for being the most expensive film in Korean history. Originally budgeted at $35 million, the cost of the special effects ballooned to the point where the final budget was just under $100 million. Time for me to stop talking, though. Nick, what did you make of Dragon Wars?
It's the only movie that I of this type that I wish was longer. Sometimes you see a film and it's a little painful to watch, and you're like, oh, this is bad. And then the special effects happen, and you're like, oh, this is really bad. But I wanted more purely so I could understand the story a little bit more, to understand the lore, to really understand what was going on. I tried to take notes, but some things would just happen, and I'm like, I'm going to put the pen down because there's no sense in trying to make any sense of this. Like, it's sometimes it's just like, hey, they did that in this movie, we're going to do it in ours, and they just up and do it. Part of me wonders why there was even a plot. Part of me wonders why it was structured the way it was. I mean, the very beginning of the film opens and they're investigating an explosion or some type of crater, and they find a scale. There's a reporter. He sees it, and then immediately we jump back 15 years, and then from there we jump back even further for the history and the lore. And then we flash forward all the way to the present, and I'm like, this should have been done altogether different.
Well, I made a note of that sequence of events at the beginning of this film, because you rightly pull up the beginning of this film and just how confusing it is. And I actually sort of noted this down because I just thought this is an insane way to structure a movie. So, as you say, the film starts in present day, then we flash back 15 years. Then from there, we then flash back to 15th century Korea. We then flash forward 20 years. We're still in 15th century Korea, so we sort of move forward 20 years in that period. Then we come forward again to present day minus 15 years, before then finally coming back to modern day. And that's just the first 15 minutes of this movie, and by the end of that, I mean, I felt like I'd been in a sort of heavy bombardment during sort of World War II. I mean, I just felt completely shell-shocked by being, dragged through time, being dragged through all these different timelines.
Yeah, and it's wild because it also feels like there's so many different films thrown together. When they see, the crater, okay, that's like science fiction, maybe even a borderline superhero film where they find like Thor's axe in the desert or something like that, right? Thor's hammer, excuse me. And then it cuts to, a bit of a mystery, a bit of intrigue, a bit of fantasy, because we have this boy going through Jack's Antiques, which is filled with, who knows what else in there. And then we cut back even further, and it feels more like a period piece, especially when they're flying around like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And I hate to generalize it like that, but ever since that film has come out, most fighting sequences feel exactly like that when they're doing, period films like that. People magically flying across the sky in order to complete these, physics-defying feats of martial arts. And then that pulls me out of it too, because I'm like, okay, part of it's original, but then everything else is kind of ripped off. I mean, like 12, 13 minutes in, we have this massive battle scene for, assumedly, in my eyes, no reason. And it's like they took Lord of the Rings and the battle scene from Star Wars Episode 1 of Phantom Menace, put it together. The technologies don't match up because you have these huge turtle-looking dinosaurs with cannons on their back shooting who knows what. It just there's so many things that don't make sense, and I want to know more about this world just so I can understand what I saw. Because it's so much. And the film was an hour and a half, which really surprised me. I thought it would be a little bit longer.
Well, but, Nick, you actually you're actually touching on something that was changed about this particular movie, because it was actually originally a longer film. So from stuff that I've read, I think the original cut of this movie was about 2 hours 10 minutes, and they've chopped 40 minutes out of this movie, and you suspect that 40 minutes, because of the incoherence of the lore behind the story that they're telling, you suspect that 40 minutes is actually giving you that background, giving you that grounding and understanding of this kind of mythology that underpins the story of this film.
I wish those 40 minutes were in there, because
really,
when we meet these, I genuinely do, because when we meet some of these characters, it's just like, hi, I'm exposition. And the other character's like, I'm exposition. There's nothing, like, I don't care about these characters. There's nothing in the slightest that makes me interested in them, that makes me care about them. And the stuff they say, I'm like, you wouldn't say that to a normal person. Just have a conversation, have some type of connection, something. In the beginning, when they're having the flashback to 15th century, I felt more of a connection between the two characters there, the bodyguard and the I can't remember the female name, the female character.
Sarah.
Well, no, before that, on the 15th century one.
Oh, okay. Just roll with it, Nick.
Her. Well, with those two, I felt like those two had a greater connection than anything else I saw in the film. So, I mean, two star-crossed lovers, like, what's going on? And then we cut to present day, and I'm just like, can we get to what's really happening? And then it's just a mishmash. But when it takes off, it takes off. I will say that. It gets going, and it gets wild quick.
Yeah, I think you definitely mentioned a couple of problems that I picked up on this film, and I think because of the fact that a big chunks of this film were lopped out, characters aren't introduced to you properly, so you don't actually have any investment in them, you don't care about them. And I think the writing in this film is really bad, and these characters are in some pretty extraordinary situations, and either through poor writing or either because scenes have been cut out, they don't seem to have what you would think of as natural, human reactions to situations. So, at the beginning of this film, you've got this kid, and Robert Forster tells him he's actually, the reincarnation of this ancient bodyguard figure who's, lived throughout time to protect this person. And this, if someone dumped that on you, you'd have some kind of noticeable reaction, whereas this kid just sort of takes it in his stride, and then 15 years later, he's just sort of, working as a bog standard news reporter before suddenly he realizes, all right, this is my big moment. I now need to sort of step up and save this girl. And it's just sort of, okay, you've accepted that rather easily. I don't really know how to relate to you at this particular moment.
It's just thrust upon, like you said, no visible reaction, nothing. It's just like, oh, that's kind of cool. And it's tough because it just catapults you, and we're into it. And this guy, we're just supposed to believe he's a reporter. Like, how would that not impact his life? How would he not constantly think about it? He has no, outside of the necklace, he's got nothing else kind of linking him to it, no other thoughts or feelings. Whereas Sarah, when we meet her, not the first time, but like a later scene, like after were introduced to her, it's something else. She's got this book with all kind of manuscript in it, and then her friend shows up, and she's got pages all over the walls, like a conspiracy theorist, but she never elaborates on that either. And you think it would be the other way around. You think she would kind of have a necklace, not really sure what's going on, and he would be like this super obsessive, like, wait, who is he? Who am I?
I've been looking for you my whole life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And it just feels like they got the two mixed up, and it's just really, really confusing because I want more. I genuinely want more for this film. It's right on that cusp. It could have been a really solid B movie, but they just get a couple things wrong.
Well, let's take a look at the actors in this film. And probably the biggest name in this movie is Robert Forster, who people remember from Jackie Brown or from things like the Delta Force, if you're into Chuck Norris action movies that also have exploding helicopters in. And he's the biggest name here. He's certainly the only cast member in this film who's got an Oscar nomination. And he's got a very strange role in this film. He basically is Mr. Exposition, and he's involved in this frankly horrendous scene that opens the film, where it feels, you watch that scene and basically it feels like you're being waterboarded with exposition. And we first meet him as this sort of weird floating guru, and he then keeps cropping up throughout the film, and he's shape-shifting into different characters with absolutely no explanation. What did you make of Robert Forster's role in this film and the performance he gives in this frankly bonkers movie?
I liked seeing him whenever he was on screen. He's just got one of those appearances where I'm like, oh, he's here, and I feel like I'm in good hands.
I feel like you're safe, don't you?
I do a little bit, and he handles his material well. Like in the beginning, yeah, the story is a little all over the place, but the way he delivers it, I can kind of follow it and it can kind of make sense, right? I kind of have a vibe of like, okay, I know somewhat of what I'm getting into. He's a familiar enough voice that I can understand what's going on. But outside of that, I'm like, I kind of want him to be in the movie more, but then what more could he contribute other than exposition? I feel like they don't really give him more or enough really to, flex that muscle that I know he has. Like I recently rewatched Jackie Brown and I really enjoyed it. He was solid in Twin Peaks: The Return. It's a real bummer that he passed away earlier this year. It was just nice to see him and go like, you know what? I got to revisit this guy's filmography because he shouldn't be in a movie like this. He deserves better.
Well, a big part of this film are the special effects, and those were the reason that this became the most expensive film in Korean history, or certainly it was at the time. I mean, what do you think of what we got on screen here?
I think if you watch it in standard definition on a tube TV or a really, really, really old LCD TV, I think you're fine. For the time, could it have been a lot stronger? Absolutely. But it's not terrible. It's definitely not what we have today. Definitely not what we have today. But for the time, it works. There's a couple scenes where they obviously got very lazy. And a couple scenes where they just completely forgot to put it in there. There's a scene during the exploding helicopters, and we'll get to it, of course, but there's a scene where the tanks and the army are shooting, but they're shooting at nothing because they forgot to add the monsters in there. It's not – I want to make it better than what it is, but I'm sure it's just absolutely terrible. Like if you go back and see it, like just awful. And I think what doesn't help it is it's so much. There's not a lot of practical effects, especially when it comes to the helicopters. There's a lot of CGI there. What baffles me even more, I was looking at it. Apparently it won a Grand Bell Award for Best Visual Effects, and those awards are equivalent to the American Oscars. And I'm like, that's a big leap to say that it had the best effects.
I think the special effects in this film, they're not a problem. I mean, they're actually pretty good, and frankly, the special effects are just not the problem of this movie. I think this problem's got way other problems. It's got very bland central actors. As we've already mentioned, the writing is absolutely horrendous. The way the film is structured and the way in which it tries to tell the story, those are much more real problems that this film has than the special effects. And I think that one thing that is noticeable though is actually how well the special effects are integrated with the real actors, because there are some scenes in here where you see people responding to the monsters, and obviously the actors are just having to imagine what's happening in front of them because the CGI is going to be put in later, and either because of the direction or either because of the actors that were hired to do those scenes, like the way in which they're put together, the humans don't seem to be responding in a realistic or natural way to the events that are happening in front of them. So I actually think it's less the special effects and actually more sort of the way in which they're integrated with the human actors in some key scenes that is the bigger problem that this film has in terms of its FX.
I would agree with that. A lot of characters, especially when the dragons take the city and people are running away, they run away as if they were Shelley Duvall in The Shining, very cartoonish and exaggerated. If it's me, I'm booking it. I'm going as fast as I can. I'm screaming. But like you said, I think there's just not enough depth there. There's not enough, not intensity, urgency. There's not enough urgency to go, my life is on the line. I need to get out of here. And I think if we saw that, it'd be a little more believable.
Okay, I think we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at some record-breaking exploding helicopter action.
Hi everyone, this is Tim Costa.
I'm Hermano de Silva.
And this is Walter Vinci.
And together we are the First Time Watchers podcast.
Each week we choose a movie to review that none of us has seen.
Watch it together.
And then discuss.
These movies could be new.
Or old.
Or on our list of shame.
You can find us on iTunes by searching for the First Time Watchers podcast.
As well as on Stitcher.
And we love interacting with our listeners, so if you have any suggestions, send us a tweet.
An email.
Or post to our Facebook page.
We'd love to hear from you.
That's right. I mean, it's all about interaction.
And talk about what we love. Movies.
And you don't have to worry about us going on and on about this and that and the other. And let's talk about this minutiae here.
Shut up.
And I wonder who the gas can
God damn it, shut up.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. This occurs about halfway through the film, during the big assault on Los Angeles. A squadron of Apache attack helicopters are scrambled to fight the flying, fire-breathing dragon threat. We're then treated to an extended series of aerial dogfights between the rotor-bladed aircraft and their scaly-winged adversaries. Nick, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
It was a lot. It was a whole lot. It was an assault on the senses. It was so much happening at once, and it was fun. Like, it was really fun to look at it from an excitement and an adventure standpoint. It was awesome. From a realistic standpoint, I'm like, there's no way you can make that kind of turn. How do you have all this unlimited ammo? So it's a combination of believable and unbelievable that just makes it exciting for me.
Yeah, and we get 9 exploding helicopters in this particular sequence when these Apache attack helicopters go up against the dragons, and we get to see them dispatched in a whole variety of ways. So some of them get munched by the dragons. Some of them get kind of wrestled or thrown to the ground. Some of them get blown up by the dragons. Sending breathing fireballs into the helicopters. Some of them then are, because of all of the aerial chaos that are going on, one of them, crashes into a building, after which it explodes. So, did you think that the film fully exploited the possibilities of helicopters versus dragons?
I do, to about 90%. I think we're missing 2 that could have been really, really well done. We're missing one where a dragon is leading a helicopter and another one goes to cut it off, and the dragon maybe pulls up and 2 helicopters hit each other and explode. I think that would have been a great one to see. And then we don't really see a lot of interaction with the ground forces. I think the turtle-looking dinosaurs that had the huge cannons on their back, launching one off at them and taking it out, I think that would have been another great one to see, but they cover a lot of bases here. They're literally, like you said, just grabbed and slammed. Some of them are like pile drive down, a collision with a building, fire explosions. They're all over the place, and it's a wonderful array, but I was really, really hoping that there'd be like a collision one in there somewhere, because it's bound to happen. There's so many dragons, there's so many helicopters out there. It's got to happen. I mean,
it's absolute chaos, and
it is.
There was one that I particularly enjoyed where the helicopters are flying in between the skyscrapers of Los Angeles, and one of the helicopters they sort of fly between some buildings, and it looks like they've lost the dragons, and so this helicopter just pauses in midair, and then the pilot slowly looks up and realizes that all the dragons are clinging to the side of a skyscraper. I thought that was a sort of nice, effective moment of tension before that pilot then realizes the magnitude of the trouble they're in.
It really is, and it's a double moment, because just before that, when they actually come rolling in and show up, the one shoots a fireball like missile out of its mouth, and that's another one where it's like, oh, these guys aren't playing around. Like, this is going to get serious. It's not just like a game of cat and mouse where they got to run away from each other. These things can fight back in a big bad way. So it's interesting. I feel like there's so much more stakes involved in this fight, which lasts for 7 or 8 minutes, than there is in the entire film.
And the other thing that is worth mentioning, if people listening to this decide to go and watch Dragon Wars and check out all of the exploding helicopter action, is that you need to watch this film very carefully, because this extended battle scene that takes place in Los Angeles, on the ground and in the skies above the city, you need to be very eagle-eyed, because some of the exploding helicopters are very obvious. They fill the screen with the fireballs, but there is so much sort of aerial activity going on that you sort of need to spot all of the exploding helicopters. You actually need to sort of focus in some parts on some of the stuff that is going on in the background, in the very far distance. And there are 2 exploding helicopters here which are just sort of happen off in the distance against the skyline of Los Angeles. So when we started looking at this film, Nick, we had to have some extended discussions over email to really bottom out exactly how many exploding helicopters there were in this movie.
We did, and I'll tell you what, it was one of my favorite email exchanges ever, because I remember watching this scene over and over and over, freeze framing and slow motion, just everything I could do to make sure I got every single one. Like, I am meticulous, but I have never been that meticulous in all of my life. And when we hit that number of 9, I was a little disappointed we couldn't hit 10, but a street sign and it smacks it down. We don't see the explosion, so we can't call anything. But the variety that we get and the number that we get, it's just impressive. And I don't know if the director had this in mind when he sought it out and he was looking for a lot, or if we just got really lucky. But it's great. It's so great. But it is really important for those eagle-eyed ones to really look in there and catch, because if not, you blink and you miss it, really.
But, I mean, I know you're disappointed that we didn't get to 10 with this movie, but, it does lay out the tantalizing possibility of, that's a challenge that can be thrown down to a filmmaker. Who's going to be the first to go double-digit exploding helicopters in their movie?
Hear me out. It's not Michael Bay. It's Wes Anderson.
He's going to do double-digit exploding helicopters.
He's going to do it. He's currently working on a World War II musical. Now, I don't know my history that well, but I feel like there were some helicopters in World War II. And we might get a big musical number where there's a lot of explosions going on, and it would be pretty wonderful to see that.
Well, Wes Anderson is one of the few, I guess you would call them, art house directors to have exploded a helicopter in his movie, because he does blow one up in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. So
he knows how to do it.
He knows how to do it. Which is more than you can say for Martin Scorsese. We're still, people say he's a filmmaking great. Well, he's yet to explode a helicopter in one of his films. So, at the moment, I'm not sure I can really rate him.
If you had to, though, in any of his films, what film would you have put an exploding helicopter in?
The Silence. It would have perked it up no end.
Ooh, that would have been good. I was thinking either Shutter Island, like some way, somebody tries to escape and one goes down, or, and hear me out, Passion of the Christ. Not Passion of the Christ. I messed that up. God damn it, I messed it up. The Last Temptation of Christ. I'm so disappointed in myself, man. God damn it.
I think there should be an exploding helicopter in any biography, real or imagined, of Christ's life. But I'm a man of no faith, so I'm happy to have such anachronisms introduced into the story of Jesus. But I think we better wrap things up right here and now, Nick. So thanks for joining me once again. In the unlikely event that any of our listeners are interested in hearing more of you on a podcast, do you want to tell people about where they can find you online?
Absolutely. I am a member in good standing of the French Toast Sunday. You can find us FrenchToastSunday.com, on the French Toast Sunday podcast. We've been pumping out episodes just about every other week. We throw an episode down. We just finished up. We took a little bit of break from film, and we looked at our favorite TV shows of 2019. That was a really good chat that everybody had. That episode should be up end of the year, beginning of January. Then when we hit January, obviously we'll have our top films of 2019. But next year is going to be a really big year for us. It's our 10-year anniversary at FTS. And we're also going to be looking back on a lot of decades. So you're going to see a lot of lists of, what's happened the past decade. It's going to be a very big reflective year, and I'm excited to see what all we do.
Cool. Well, I will look out for that with a lot of excitement. So, as always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website. We just had a bit of a major overhaul of some of our content there, and updated some of the information about the actors and the directors who've been involved with the most films with exploding helicopters. So why don't you go and check that out? As always, we will be back soon, but until then, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.